Yo, it's Elliot with Yo Elliot. You got strength questions and I got your answer. Yo, Elliot. Well, today we got a question from our triathlete buddy who wants to know how to get stronger using Primal patterns. Check him out.
Yo, Elliot. I've got some strength questions and I know you can get an answer for me. So these primal movement patterns, I'm curious on how to move them into my routine. Do I sort of bring them in, with my current routine, or should I just scratch that and make a routine solely of these six type of movements? And if I do scratch the old routine, which shouldn't be too hard, and build a whole new one, how do I do it? Do I make a split with these throughout the week? Do I do a variety of them in each day of my workouts? How would I get that in there?
Well, man, very first thing I want to do is thank you for visiting us here on this strength training channel. We usually don't do much with regard to endurance athletics, but I have a few ideas that might support you, especially since you already understand the concept of training with primal patterns. For those of you who are not familiar, that's a term coined by Paul Chek, which basically describes all of the movement patterns available to the human being. And to be the strongest version of yourself or the best athlete, you should be able to perform all of these primal patterns in an effective manner. If you lack the ability to perform any of these patterns that I'll share with you in a moment, then you put yourself at risk for injury and you'll never reach your full potential. Those patterns are push, pull, squat, lunge, bend, twist, and gait, which basically means you've got to be able to walk, gait. So designing strength and conditioning programs here at Strength Camp, my gym, always stems from those 7 patterns. I'm always either ascending or descending those patterns in order to help my athletes get stronger for their sport or better for their sport. You're a triathlete. So if I'm going to design a program for you, which by the way I'm trying to figure out how I can support you, and I just figured I'll give you a sample program, right? Not all the parameters are there, but the most important ones which you need, which are what patterns to use, how to integrate them into your program. When designing programs, this is the way I do it. As a triathlete, you are in a sagittal dominant sport. That basically means everything you do is right here. You're either running this way, sagittal plane, for those of you who don't know, that's forward. You're either running here, you're swimming here, you're biking here. Everything that you're doing is in this same plane of motion. In order to maximize your athletic ability and in order to remain injury-free, you want to train in multiple planes of motion. So there's also the frontal plane, transverse plane. You want to train in the twisting pattern or plane of motion, which is called the transverse, as well as frontally, right? So you're going to design a program using all primal patterns. I suggest you train twice a week with this routine. I wouldn't spend more than twice a week in the gym as a triathlete. I'd spend more of my time practicing my sport. But when you go to the gym, you want to really maximize the time that you're there. You don't want to spend it further facilitating these recruitment patterns that are locked into the sagittal plane. You're just going to further facilitate the dysfunction that'll cause. So on top of that, I hope you're doing a lot of mobility, flexibility work. Here's the deal. I'm going to show you how we use all of the patterns, and because you need to move in multiple planes of motion, I'm going to give you a plane of motion that's being challenged with each of these exercises. Day 1, front squat. The reason why I like front squat is because it forces thoracic extension. Bikers, swimmers, runners tend to be somewhat kyphotic or have a tendency towards that. So when we squat, I don't want to put a weight on your back and cause you to become more kyphotic, especially if your thoracic extension is not strong. But why not just strengthen your thoracic extension with front squats? Put the bar up front, get your elbows up, chest up, sink your hips, bend your ankles, knees, and hips, bust that out. You got your squat pattern. You're working in a sagittal plane of motion, which is cool. Like I mentioned, we want to avoid that, but because you're working thoracic extension, it's moving you out of a ingrained pattern. Multi-directional lunges. So you know what a lunge is, right? You've got your sagittal plane lunge. What I'm going to ask you to do also is to move into the frontal plane And you can also go into the transverse plane by going at a 45-degree angle. So I'm not going to demonstrate here because obviously you can't see me, but with a multi-directional lunge, working the frontal, transverse, and sagittal plane, you're going to step forward, and then you're going to step back. Then you're going to step on a 45-degree angle, keeping your toes square, hips square, shoulders and eyes square. So your feet will look like this. You're working in the transverse plane when you do that. And then step to the outside and come back with a side lunge. That's your frontal plane. So like I said, if you're in a sagittal dominant sport, you're never going to see the transverse plane or frontal plane unless you trip and have to catch yourself, and then that's usually when guys hurt themselves. You won't, because you're moving in the multiple planes of motion. That's your lunge pattern. Cable push, you guys have seen me do some of the cable exercises in my other videos. I'm not going to link it up here today because I want to go home. But you can go to my older videos from just about 5-6 days ago, where you'll see me training and offer other athletes training answers using the cable exercise that I have here. So the cable push. So when you see me grabbing the cable and pushing it forward, that's working the transverse and sagittal plane. Push, lunge, and twist. This is a compound movement. Very powerful exercise, especially for an athlete that doesn't move through these planes of motion. You might be awkward at first, but practice it. Cable chops, I also show you in that video. Grab from up high, stay in the frontal plane, cross. You're also going to be working in a transverse plane when you do that. That's your side lunge and your twist pattern in those multiple planes of motion. Crack press is basically where you take so we're working the press on this one, basically take a dumbbell, look at the crack of a mirror. So if you've got multiple mirrors set up, right down the middle, let that line go down the middle of your body, line everything up so it's completely even on both sides, grab the dumbbell on one side, and try to keep your body straight. Try not to do this, or let your hip hike up on one side. Try to remain straight. Basically, you're going to use core stability and focus to work the frontal plane with your press. I don't like you doing any sagittal plane pressing because, like I said, you're probably pretty kyphotic to begin with just because of the nature of your sport. But we want you pressing, right? So let's work it in the frontal plane and also get some transverse action. Day 2, deadlifts. You're working your bend pattern. It's sagittal, but deadlifts force thoracic extension. We talked about how important that is for you with your front squat. You're going to work bend over rows as your second exercise. Sagittal also, but it's your pull pattern and it's working that thoracic extension. All very important. You guys have been watching my videos for years. You know that I preach thoracic extension, thoracic extension, thoracic extension. Always. Getting your chest up, getting your shoulders down and back, squaring your body up. That's going to support you there. Cable pull, you'll see in my other video. Grab the cable, yank it back. You're working the pull, lunge, and twist. Like I said, this is a very compound or integrated exercise. You're working the transverse and sagittal plane. Dude, this is the best program ever for you. Reverse wood chops, you see my other video, transverse frontal plane, lunge, pull, and twist. 3-way core hold, you're working, obviously, sagittal, transverse, and frontal plane, working stability. I would probably also do some sort of hip and back extension or prone cobra. You can Google it to find prone cobra, you can add to that. And that's gonna work your thoracic extension. Again, really important shit. So take home message for most athletes here that aren't endurance athletes. Move in multiple planes of motion. Use all of your primal patterns when designing strength training programs. If you're a bodybuilder, you probably turned this video off a long time ago because I'm not teaching you how to pump up your bicep or get the Christmas tree in your lower back or whatever the bodybuilding lingo is. I'm teaching you how to move and how to be athletic and a badass. There you go, dude. Hope that helps. Talk to you next time. Yo, Elliot.